Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Norwich City Council Sustainable Development Panel. It is Tuesday, the 4th of November 2025. Before we kick off, I've got some housekeeping. So first of all, actually, I'll introduce myself. My name is Councillor Ian Stuteley, and I'm the chair of this panel. And onto the housekeeping. Action in the event of emergency. There are no practice alarms planned for this meeting, so if an alarm sounds, please evacuate City Hall by going down the main entrance out to the War Memorial in front of City Hall. Please would speakers use microphones at all times and speak directly into the microphone. Please mute the microphones when not speaking. The meeting is being live streamed on the Council's YouTube channel. Members of the committee may use electronic devices to access their meeting papers, and visitors are welcome to use mobile phones and other devices, including cameras, but please use them discreetly and set them to silent when not in use. Do not use voice or camera flash functions. Members of the committee and officers will introduce themselves, starting from my left and going round the room. Thank you.
Councillor Champion, I represent the Shule Ward.
Hi. Councillor Judith Lubbock, and I represent Eaton Ward.
Councillor Richard Laws, representing Bowthorpe Ward.
Councillor Hannah Höch, and I represent Nelson Ward.
Councillor Emma Hampton, University Ward.
Thank you, and on my right.
Hi, I'm Councillor Adam Giles, and I'm here not as a member of the panel, but as the Cabinet Member for Planning and Regulatory Services.
I'm Mike Burrell. I'm an officer. As of Monday, I'm the Greater Norwich Planning Policy Manager. Until Monday, I was the Norwich Planning Policy Manager. So I've got a great.
Welcome, Mike, and congratulations.
Robert Carmichael, Democratic Services Manager.
Okay, and we have one further person joining us, and that is Dan Bowditch, joining on Teams. And I believe Dan is from Norwich Airport. Is that correct?
Yes, I'm a Principal Transport Planner at PGA, and we've been working on behalf of the airport.
Okay, thank you. So the next item is apologies, please. Any apologies today?
No apologies, Chair.
Thank you. And declarations of interest? I don't see any. Thank you. Okay, so the next item is minutes. Do we agree the minutes from the last meeting, and are there any questions?
Chair, just a note so that my officer was unable to get them to the meetings. They'll be presented to the next meeting for confirmation.
Okay, thank you. That will explain why there weren't any in the pack. Thank you. And finally, item 4. So it's a Norwich Airport Surface Access Strategy that I'll be introduced by Councillor Giles, and then we'll hear from Dan. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I will introduce, then pass over to Dan, and then he'll pass back to myself. So many thanks, and thank you to Dan for attending today. So this report presents Norwich Airport Limited's Surface Access Strategy. The report is being brought to SDP today for questions, comments, and any recommendations from the panel in advance of going to Cabinet for endorsement later this month. I was going to introduce Dan Bowditch, who's already introduced himself. It is firstly important to stress that this report will be seeking endorsement from Cabinet for this surface access strategy alone. I appreciate some councillors have broader anxieties about the challenging timescale to make future aviation growth environmentally sustainable, but that is not a matter under direct consideration by this report. The surface access strategy covers all land within the airport's operational boundary. It sets out targets and measures to enhance sustainability of surface access for both airport staff and passengers, and also all current and future tenanted businesses. The production of the surface access strategy was a requirement under the Norwich Airport Master Plan, which was adopted in 2019, and a condition on the outline planning consent granted in 2023 for the proposed Imperial Park development on the airport site. The Imperial Park outline planning consent granted outline permission for 60,000 square metres of aviation related uses and 30,000 square metres of general employment uses. Chapter 2 of the strategy in the report from page 31 of the committee report sets out the planning policy framework. Paragraph 110 of the NPPF sets out that the planning system should actively manage patterns of growth by seeking to make significant development more sustainable by offering a genuine choice of transport modes. Paragraph 111 specifically sets out that planning authorities should recognise the importance of maintaining a national network of airports while providing for their infrastructure needs to support their continued operation, expansion and contribution to the wider economy. With regards to the local planning policy framework, Policy 1 of the GNLP concerning sustainable growth strategy defines Norwich Airport as a key strategic employment location in Greater Norwich. Policy 4 regarding strategic infrastructure supports the growth and regional significance of Norwich Airport for both leisure and business travel, while Policy 6 regarding the economy promotes the airport for its key role in servicing the offshore energy industry and as a key economic asset in the Cambridge to Norwich Tech Corridor. The Imperial Park site is an allocated site in the GNLP for the form of development for which conditional outline planning consent has since been granted. Crucially, the GNLP, as reflected in the condition imposed on Imperial Park, requires that an airport surface access strategy is produced before occupation of 30,000 square metres or more of floor space is occupied on the site. That strategy is brought to you here today, and I will now pass over to Dan Bowditch, who will present the targets and measures set out in Norwich Airport Limited strategy. Thank you.
Thank you everyone for having me here today to talk through the surface access strategy, and apologies I couldn't join you in person. So as I said, I'm a transport planner working for PGA, and we've been working on behalf of the airport to prepare this strategy. My personal involvement in the project goes all the way back to the Imperial Park planning application in 2021. The surface access strategy covers all land within the airport's operational boundary, including existing and future tenant businesses. As has been outlined, it considers how staff and passengers travel to the airport. The entire report sets out a policy context, a baseline assessment of transport conditions, planned growth at the airport. There's a travel demand model which looks at existing and future travel demand. There's some carbon calculations which estimates the environmental impact, a set of targets and measures, and then a monitoring and governance structure for how the strategy will be managed, taken forward. Today, I'd like to give you an overview of the strategy and be on hand to answer any technical queries if there are any. The airport has worked collaboratively with the council to get the strategy to this point. We set up a joint working group, and that included officers from Broadland, Norwich and Norfolk. We discussed the strategy at key points and agreed each element of the report as we went along. I'm going to start by talking about the travel demand model. So the travel demand model predicts the number of staff and passenger trips on a typical peak day at the airport when it's at its busiest. There's three scenarios in the travel demand model. There's a 2022 base, which is the baseline scenario we used, that looks at existing staff and passenger travel. There's a 2030 future year scenario that assumes nothing happens and there's no surface access strategy. and there's a 2030 do something scenario, which assumes that the surface access strategy is successfully implemented and achieves its short-term targets. This is what we use to help estimate the environmental impact of growth at the airport and the environmental impact of implementing the surface access strategy. The overarching aim of the strategy was to make sure that the forecasted growth at the airport did not result in a growth in carbon emissions. This aligns with the airport's own ambitions, including the net zero 2040 commitment, and also their own journey on the carbon accreditation scheme. They're working towards a level 3 accreditation in 2027, which this strategy will contribute towards. I'd like to talk next about the targets in the surface access strategy. We presented a first iteration of the targets to the joint working group, and it was considered that these weren't ambitious enough and there was a greater scope for modal shift. Therefore, we've been working collaboratively with the group to make sure that the targets are ambitious enough while still being achievable. As you can see, the targets are split into short-term and long-term 15-year targets. The short-term targets are generally looking at a 5-year timescale, while the longer-term targets are looking at a 15-year timescale and are a bit more high level because it's harder to predict that far into the future. As you'll be able to see from the figure in the report, there's been several changes to the targets. For airport passengers, the first revision of the target was for a 0.8% increase in sustainable modes. After discussion with the group and working with the council, that's now increased to a 9.2% increase in sustainable modes within 5 years compared to the baseline. For tenant staff, we initially started with a target of a 1.1% increase in sustainable modes compared to baseline. The fourth revision, as agreed with the joint working group, is now a 12.7% increase in sustainable modes within 5 years. It was agreed with the joint working group that these targets are now ambitious, but they're also realistic and achievable. And I think that table shows that the airport has worked collaboratively with the council to increase the targets. Moving on to carbon emissions. So we calculated the potential carbon emissions generated by surface access to the airport using the greenhouse gas conversion factors, which are published by the government, specifically carbon dioxide equivalent. So this enables different types of emissions to be compared like for like, so that you can see you're using a single unit rather than several units. If the targets set out within the surface access strategy are realised, there's potential to save 2.1 tonnes of carbon dioxide equivalent compared to the do nothing scenario on a typical day. As shown in figure 6 of the committee report, the existing peak 24-hour daily carbon emissions are 18.5 tonnes. If the ASAS was not to be implemented, then the growth of the airport and part occupation of Imperial Park would mean that the carbon equivalent emissions would rise to 20.44 tonnes, an increase of 1.94 tonnes per day. However, if the short-term targets in the strategy are achieved, it's predicted that the daily emissions would be 18.39 tonnes, which is 2.05 tonnes less than the do nothing scenario and 0.11 tonnes less than the 2022 base. The conclusion of these calculations is that the airport can grow and Imperial Park can be delivered without there being an increase in CO2 emissions from surface access to the site. To achieve the targets, there is a large suite of measures in the report. There's too many to go through now, so I've just highlighted some key examples. The measures are a mixture of infrastructure schemes, measures that commit to working with key partners such as the Highway Authority and bus providers, and also a comprehensive suite of behaviour change measures. Some examples of measures include the provision and enhancement of cycle parking, of showering, changing and locker facilities, real-time bus information and improved bus shelters, working with bus operators to align services with shift patterns and flight schedules, provision of EV charging points for cars and bikes, provision of travel information packs to staff, providing up-to-date travel options on the airport website to allow visitors to plan journeys to the site, facilitating the delivery of the airport industrial estate sustainable travel link, improving wayfinding near to and within the site to help with first and last mile journeys, feasibility study to support Norfolk County Council with the delivery of improvements to the yellow pedalway, and also to identify other improvements and potential funding opportunities to improve pedestrian and cycle connections from the airport. The airport and the tenant businesses are already implementing lots of measures. So I just wanted to provide some examples of some of the current activity at the airport. The airport have recently been looking to introduce a salary sacrifice scheme for electric vehicles. They are partnered with Mobility Ways, who are a Norwich-based company who monitor their staff travel every year and help to organise car sharing. They're working on the airport is working on a carbon reduction strategy. They've recently been working on installing a travel hub within the terminal and a new bus shelter outside the terminal. In terms of tenant businesses on site, several businesses, including KLM and Saxon Air, have cycle to work schemes. Several businesses have been implementing cycle shelters and changing facilities. And then also some of the offshore companies such as Perenco have other measures that are more tailored to their staff. So Perenco, for instance, offer a shared transport scheme for offshore works that links to the local hotel. We were conscious we didn't want this report to just sit on a shelf, so we want it to be a dynamic document, and therefore the report allows for annual reviews of targets and measures so that these can be adjusted year on year as required. And this will help the airport to achieve the targets set out. And as I mentioned before, there's also a comprehensive governance structure in the report. So this includes a surface access strategy steering group, a transport forum, and then coordinators at business level to implement the measures set out within the strategy. There'll also be a dedicated surface access strategy coordinator, which sits across the three groups. This will ensure that the strategy is delivered going forward. I will now pass back over to Councillor Giles for his concluding thoughts. Thank you.
Many thanks, Dan. I want to thank Joy Brown, our Planning Policy Officer, for her work in partnership with Dan and the airport to achieve some of the more ambitious targets out in this strategy, which Dan has set out. I do think this illustrates the benefits of Norwich City Council continuing to take a partnership approach to working with the airport. As such, I am recommending Cabinet endorses the surface access strategy, fulfilling our national and local obligations as a planning authority and allowing the airport to progress when viable with reserved matters applications for the Imperial Park development, opening up opportunities for significant economic growth and job creation for Norwich's workers. Both myself, with the support of Mike for technical questions, of course, and Dan are happy to take questions, comments and any recommendations SDP may have before the item goes to Cabinet. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Giles, and thank you, Dan, for the report. I'll hand over to members of the panel now for any questions they may have and some debate on this item. So who wants to go first? Councillor Hookner.
Yeah, thank you very much. I do understand that the paper in front of us is about Norwich Airport surface access strategy rather than the master plan itself, but because it is very much based on the premises endorsed by the master plan, I do have questions and concerns around the future that is envisioned here and that this kind of works towards. And so the travel strategies that are proposed here would lead to a total reduction or to a non-emission of carbon of around 2 tons. Now, a return flight to Tenerife is about 1 ton of carbon. So I just think we need to be mindful of the bigger picture when we're discussing these proposed changes here. And the airport plans to expand passenger numbers by 1 million per year between now and 2045. Now, I think we also need to remember that the Climate Change Commission, for example, is very skeptical about airport expansion and highlights that the technologies to make air travel net zero just aren't at the point where they would need to be for that to be realistic. So my question, I think, for officers is, I know we're not discussing the master plan here, but is there any way for the council to comment on these growth plans, to revise its endorsement, and to just raise concerns about the carbon dimensions here?
Thank you. Just to follow up before you answer that, I think it is reasonable to have some context, isn't there, about the amount of emissions coming from the surface level of an airport compared with the aviation. I think the industry suggests that it's around 5% at a surface level of total. So we're talking about a reduction in targets here of 20% of 5%, which is very low indeed in comparison to the whole impact of an airport. But anyway, Councillor Giles, please.
Yes, thank you. No, it's a perfectly valid point to make. Obviously, this is endorsing the surface access strategy. It's not looking at endorsing or not airport aviation expansion. The airport was constructed prior to the Town and Country Planning Act 1948, and as such, there's no planning consent connected to the airport's use. So we have very limited planning control over that. And since the 2016 Basingstoke case, which for those of us that were around in 2019 when we had the master plan discussions may remember, since the 2016 Basingstoke case, it hasn't been possible for planning authorities to consider intensification of aviation activity as a material change of use. So I wanted to set that context in the planning, and in response to those broader concerns about decarbonisation of the airport and how feasible that is. Dan, I appreciate you're only a consultant for the airport on this project. I'm not sure if you're able to comment on that or whether that's something that's going to have to go back to the airport.
Yeah, I think that one might have to go back to the airport, because I've been primarily involved in the surface access strategy.
Don't know, Mike, if you have anything further to say. Sorry about this, but yeah, unfortunately we don't have anyone from the airport itself here. They were invited, but obviously they've sent Dan along as a consultant, and he has been working on this specific project. So understandably, that is his scope.
Okay, so there may be a way in which we can take this forward to the airport and get some answers on that, but we'll have to think about that.
You may wish to invite the airport to a future meeting.
Yes, thank you. Okay, so I saw, Councillor Hopman, do you have any follow-up questions to that?
Yeah, I think I understand from Councillor Giles that we aren't in a position to refuse planning consent, but I don't think that would prevent the council from voicing concerns, and I'm not sure that has been done. So I would like to make a recommendation to that effect, that we recommend Cabinet voices concerns about planned airport growth and the associated emissions in light of that recent progress report by the Climate Change Commission.
Okay, thank you. Do you want to come back on that, Councillor Giles? Please do.
I would have probably come in as part of a discussion, because it sort of follows on from that. But I share a lot of the wider decarbonisation concerns, but this is a particular strategy we're looking at today. If this comes as a recommendation, I don't know practically how that works. We presumably at this stage can't insert anything into this. That's not our role here. today. I'm not really sure how that works practically, making a recommendation on something that's outside the scope of what we're looking at. It probably kind of muddies the waters a bit at best, but we are, and I completely get this, the sort of want to look at carbon emissions associated with flights and comparing it to what we've got here, but as has been said, the targets here are more ambitious, but they still have to be achievable. Putting those figures side by side doesn't really affect what else can be done, I presume, in this context to get a bit more. You're never going to have parity, as you say, but, you know, kind of close that gap. I think this is what it is. I'm not sure this is the right forum or kind of to be pushing those sort of recommendations through. I would have thought that's more a political full council style, you know, ask, but that was kind of, as I say, I would have come in discussion rather than try to kind of formally answer that, but that's my kind of view at the moment.
Okay, thank you. I saw Councillor Lubbock next, but apologies, before we do that, it might be a good idea to establish what this panel can do today, and what Cabinet indeed are able to do. I believe this is coming to Cabinet next week, and so therefore it would be interesting to know the scope of the powers that the council has. I understand that are we joint planning authorities, or is it just Broadland that covers this?
Us and Broadland.
So both of us. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Mike?
The airport is partly in Broadland, partly in Norwich. So this is about endorsement. It's not our strategy. It's about endorsing it. The nearest equivalent we have elsewhere in the city is with UEA's expansion plans. We endorse those. So we're asking for comments about what should be said to council, Cabinet, not council, recommendations. So I think you can say what you wish to Cabinet about endorsement.
So therefore we could ask Cabinet to strengthen this and add further conditions into and recommendations for the strategy.
Potentially.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Because it's the airport strategy, obviously all recommendations will then have to go back to discussions with the airport rather than us. We obviously can't change the airport strategy unilaterally.
Okay, but it is a condition of planning, isn't it? So there is some scope for the authorities to impose conditions. Is that correct, or am I conflating this with other planning? Yes, Robert, please.
So it's a condition of the permission that's already been granted. So there's a requirement for this this plan to be produced, this strategy to be produced.
Okay.
It's happening now.
Okay, but is it necessary for the planning authorities to accept it and not just endorse it? Okay.
Sorry, Chair. Sorry, members. Just so that we're sort of absolutely clear on what we've got before us is, as we say, we're looking at possible recommendations that then Cabinet will consider whether it's to endorse it, whether there's other points that you want Cabinet to consider alongside and possibly include as points with that statement. But essentially, the decision maker would be Cabinet as to give a view to them and any other points therein that you feel would be appropriate. Thank you, Chair.
Yep, thank you. Okay, so excuse me, Councillor Lubbock next, please.
Yes. And that is looking to see if we can endorse this, and if we have any issues that they want the Cabinet to consider alongside it. I mean, the risk of not endorsing it is that the airport don't implement any of the good work in here. So it's small, it may be, but I think very important, because you know, it's an opportunity, and every opportunity needs to be taken. So I'm pleased that we, with the joint working, that we push the targets and have arrived at something more challenging. The issue is that I don't know a lot about how to get to the airport, and I'm particularly interested in buses. So when they say that they are going to have a bus shelter outside the airport. I didn't know there was a bus that went to the airport. So I'd like a bit more information about what buses do go to the airport. And I mean really in the airport, not the park and ride, because that's pretty useless if you've got sort of heavy cases. But I do really feel that there's an opportunity here to improve bus travel. There was some mention of a Connect bus going to there. Well, Connect have just been bought by another company, and they will be changing their routes and expanding them and making them more sustainable. So now's the very time to encourage them to serve the airport more efficiently, presumably from Castle Meadow and other points. So I'd like to know a bit more about what the buses are that currently serve the airport. And also, I mean, when people book tickets to fly somewhere, will they be some information about the fact that they might be able to take a bus to the airport and not use their cars and not, therefore have to pay for car parking? So what buses are available at the moment, and will there be more information for people actually using planes to use the buses as well?
Thank you. Before you answer that, just point people to page 8 of our report, and that is the figure 6 on the CO2 emissions reduction. And in that, electric cars appear to be doing much of the heavy lifting, but there's page 8 of our pack. So the figure 6 at the top of that page. And it suggests in there that bus and indeed train travel will increase significantly, 10 times in the case of buses and more. So I just wondered in that context whether we can have an answer on how that is going to be achieved.
So I'm conscious that the bus service to the airport has historically been very bad. I understand that in recent times there is now this Connect 35 bus service. It's undoubtedly the case that the bus services to the airport need to significantly increase further. And I believe Dan will have more information in that regard than I'm able to provide.
Okay, Dan, please.
Yeah, I can come in on this one. So I think this raises a really valid point. I think it's making sure that people have all the information they need to travel sustainably to the airport. So there are measures in the strategy to help disseminate that information. So that will include having information on sustainable travel on the airport website, for instance. And then that also extends to staff as well. So providing materials to staff so they know exactly what's available to them. Specifically around buses. So there is a stop outside the terminal at the moment, at which the park and ride service does actually stop there, but that's being improved at the moment, that bus shelter. Then there is the 35 service, which has been mentioned. So there's other measures in the strategy as well around buses. So, and a lot of those are about working in partnership with the bus providers to ensure things like bus services line up with shift patterns and flight times, and also provide a good frequency of service. So this strategy should provide that framework to help have those conversations with providers and improve the existing access.
Okay, thank you. So I have Councillor Padder, then Councillor Hockner again, Councillor Laws and Councillor Champion on my list. So Councillor Padder, please.
Thank you. Point 37. There's a statement here: the risk of not endorsing the ASAS is that the airport stop positively engaging with the council. Does that mean that the airport can bypass council altogether and go straight to the Secretary of State for endorsement? Because my worry is that I agree with a lot of the views that have been expressed, but I feel if we don't positively engage with the airport, then they could just cut all ties with the council and just go straight to whomever in central government and say, right, it's going to be pushed through, and it will be another kind of Gatwick. Is it third, fourth runway at Gatwick? So I think that's just a worry. So I just want to be able to kind of compromise a little bit with the airport, and I don't know what that looks like, but I don't want to cut all ties.
We're not absolutely certain on whether or not they could go to the Secretary of State. We certainly weren't aware of that possibility. We do think that, hopefully that wouldn't be the case, but obviously we do think there is a risk that we wouldn't be able to have that constructive relationship, pushing them for more ambitious targets where we can. If we didn't cooperate with the airport. What I would say is, in terms of the continued aviation operations and in terms of intensifying those purely aviation operations, the airport could absolutely continue to do that regardless of whether they've got a surface access strategy or not, regardless of whether we've endorsed it or not. So they could do all of that and do none of this. So that is a possibility.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hockner, please.
Thank you. I've got two questions. One is, do I understand correctly that we can only recommend to Cabinet what to do? So I would like to make recommendations that if it endorses the access strategy, that it accompanies this endorsement by a note raising concerns about the expansion plans. Would that be a recommendation that we can make to Cabinet? If so, I'd like to put this on the agenda as something to vote on. Then I also have a question on the content, if that's okay. And that's on page 8, the target increases. So that the changes in the target increase in sustainable modes. I'm just wondering, I mean, it's nice to see that this has increased over time, but I just wonder what metrics were used to decide that this was now ambitious enough. And I know we have the carbon budget calculated by the Tyndall Centre scatter methodology that calculates a carbon budget for Norwich, and I just wonder whether that was brought into conversation with these targets in any way to decide what a needed level of carbon reductions is, to decide whether this is sufficiently ambitious or not.
Okay, thank you. Who'd like to answer that, please?
I will just point out on page 122 of the pack, in the technical modelling done on the carbon calculations, it sets out how the CO2e emissions were calculated. In terms of the technical detail beyond that, unfortunately, because Joy on our side isn't here tonight, so I don't know if Dan, if you're able to give any more detail on that.
Yeah, so the process for agreeing the targets. So the carbon calculations you see in the report, there's been a few iterations of those based on previous versions of the targets, and the primary aim with the targets was to get to a position where the growth of the airport would not result in an increase in CO2e emissions, and as you can see, we actually get a small decrease compared to the existing baseline. So that was kind of the main metric we were using. Obviously, lots of other considerations went into that as well. So it was comparing to other airports across the country and what they do, and then also looking at where staff and passengers live and how they travel to the airport at the moment, and what the propensity for them to travel by sustainable modes might be. So we took a range of factors into consideration when agreeing these with the joint working group to end up in the position where we did. Hopefully that answers the question.
Okay, does it? Would you like to come back?
I'd like to come back, if I may. I guess that just doesn't give us an answer of whether these proposed reductions would be compatible with the Paris Agreement compatible trajectory. We don't know that from these figures.
Okay, yes. I wonder if anyone can come back on that. Dan, can you give us a bit more detail about, you're asking about how these figures are arrived at? It
sounds like the metric here was to decide what seemed feasible, not what is considered necessary to stay within the kind of climate limits and emissions limits.
Yes, and also from the answer we heard, it sounds like the goal is to stand still rather than actually reduce emissions on the surface activities. Did you want to come back on that, Dan?
Yeah, I mean, just to point out, there is a reduction we're showing, albeit a small one. Also, that is a short-term target, so the strategy does have that capacity for annual review, so that can continue to be reduced further. But yeah, the goal wasn't to stand still; it was to achieve a reduction, but balancing that as well with the scope for change and making sure that the targets are achievable. So yeah, it considers both of those points.
Okay, thank you. Do you want to come back, or should we just move on for the time being? So we've got Councillor Laws next, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just a comment. Some more detailed question, but just on the bus service, I see at pages 48 and 49 of the report, there is some detail about the bus services that go to and from the airport. I would certainly support any moves to improve public transport between the airport and the city centre, including the rail station, and indeed across the city from the station through the centre to the university and hospital, which are towards my patch, as it were, in a way which is not dependent on normal traffic. I'm talking about things like trams and so on, but that's another matter. And I would like to say we should be supporting all attempts to reduce carbon footprints, in this case, in surface access to the airport. And as part of that, I was struck by the fact that a high proportion, 70–80% of the car journeys, or indeed the total journeys to the airport amongst staff, tenant employees and passengers, are single occupants of cars. Dan, you've mentioned, I think call it behavioural change measures in the whole strategy, and these include priority parking for car sharers. I wonder if you could expand on that and whether there's any thoughts about differential charging, so that if there's a charge for using for car parking, I'm not talking about passengers particularly, but the longer term, the daily users, whether there'd be some reduction or indeed free parking for car sharers.
I can come back on that. Yeah, so I think car sharing is, as you've highlighted, I think a key way of reducing the amount of car trips to the airport is promoting car sharing. Yeah, it's certainly looking at different charging for car sharing users is definitely something that could be considered. That's something I can take back to discuss with the airport. The airport also, as I was mentioning earlier, work with Mobility Ways, who offer a lift share scheme to staff. So that's something they're really keen on as a way of reducing car trips to the airport. But yeah, that's certainly something I can take on.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Champion next, please.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a question, but I'd like to just make a point. I want to reiterate what has been raised in relation to carbon emissions from the flights, the million, the fact that it says in here there's going to be 1 million more flights, which will link into my question. The idea, and the idea that we've acknowledged that the amount of the saving on emissions is really small, and yet in this discussion they've already been used words like ambitious sustainability, and for me, and it was highlighted what the dangers of not endorsing this would be that they might not do the thing. a lot of the thing is what's going to be happening anyway. People, you know, the shift from petrol to electric cars, that's occurring. These things are occurring anyway. An endorsement basically is a greenwash opportunity for the airport to have the local authorities stamped onto their, you know, pamphlets. I mean, we're talking about air flights. You're talking about having a website where people can look up the most sustainable ways to travel. That's insane. If you're going to be flying, you're not going to go on a website and then look up the most sustainable way to travel. And I appreciate they are improvements, and I appreciate the, you know, this is nice, but it is greenwashing. And I just want to be clear and on the record that that's my opinion of this. I'd be curious, turning to my question more specifically, if the delay, we've got a 7-year behind achieved forecasts, and these forecasts are, I presume, in relation to the passenger increases. So are we still aiming for 1 million more passengers, or given that we've now had a 7-year delay, has that meant that these figures which we're looking at have been impacted by that? Have we, you know, toned down this ambitious increase in the most polluting way that a human being can propel themselves from one location to another? I hope I've articulated my opinion and my question. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, you've made that quite clear. I think there's some political and technical questions in there. So I'll ask Councillor Giles first to respond to the what you probably thought would come up is the suggestion of greenwashing.
Well, no, look, you know, I hear what you're saying about the broader environmental impact of the airport's use, but what I would say is we can control what we can control as the City Council, and we are doing what we can to control what we can control. And by doing this, we are saving 2.1 tonnes CO2e per day compared to a do nothing approach where we disengage from the process. So effectively, we've got, you know, we've got two options. Either we engage with the process and support the airport in reducing these carbon emissions, or we don't, and it doesn't happen, or there's a risk that it doesn't happen. So, you know, we can only control what we control, and that's what we're doing with the resources and powers we have and the planning powers we have. In relation to the second part of what you've said, I'll have to pass over to Dan in relation to that.
Okay, thank you, Dan. Have you got any follow up to the technical matters?
So in terms of technical matters for the passenger forecast, yeah, so I can't give passenger forecast for the airport, but for the strategy, we based it off the forecasts in the master plan, with, as you say, that adjustment of figures to take account for COVID. But I can't say whether that's impacted the future growth forecasts. But in terms of what we did for the strategy, we based that off the master plan and then adjusted.
Okay, thank you. I think it's fair to say that you know, we're entitled to have an opinion on this, but with this what we're considering today, the planning permission is in place, and this is essentially a document that either if we don't endorse it, or if we don't put it forward with some further suggestions to go with it, it'll happen anyway. And the expansion of the airport is pretty much set in stone unless there's a major policy shift and a much higher level. So I believe that we're quite restricted in this panel what we can do today. Okay, so next, did you want to follow up to that? Yes.
I appreciate that I might have you know, frustrated people with my point, but I would like to make it really clear that I do not want Norwich City Council using words like ambitious when they're talking about the sustainability of the airport in relation to this, because it misconstrues. People won't see that, you know, I don't think it's I think it will just muddy the word, if that makes sense. And I think we should be very careful about how we're doing that and how we're approaching that. I'm not saying don't work with these guys. I'm just saying that if we go, this is absolutely fantastic, and at the same time talk about 1 million more passengers, I feel politics is influence. That's the only thing I've learned since becoming a councillor. And if we're not going to exercise any influence on one of the most pressing issues in the modern age, which is climate change, and we're talking about spheres of influence, we're having a meeting about an airport in our city, let's exercise our political influence and make sure that we can, you know, that, because this is, you know, this is crucial, you know, this is crucial. With carbon, we're talking about carbon and climate change, and these are, you know, these are really crucial issues.
Okay, thank you. So in the context of what we can do with this document, maybe members would like to think about how we may be able to influence the council to strengthen it, or influence the council to put pressure on the airport to strengthen it, bearing in mind that we're talking about the surface area strategy rather than the whole of the airport emissions. Robert, please.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to come back very briefly because I know that Councillor Herkner made a recommendation earlier. I wonder if it would be possible just to return to that, because I didn't quite get the wording that you said, if that's okay. Or
Yes, thank you. I made a note of that, but because there may be some more to add to it, but let's cover that now.
Yes, so my recommendation meant that Cabinet adds a note to any potential endorsement of the strategy, highlighting its concerns about the expansion plans in light of recent guidance from the Climate Change Commission around airport expansion. Sorry, was it too fast again?
Sorry, it's just so that Cabinet adds a note to their endorsement. To their decision on regarding that decision, that the expansion plans,
that Cabinet adds highlighting their concerns about the extension plans documented in the strategy in light of recent guidance by the Climate Change Commission around airport extension.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Laws was next, please.
Thank you. Just Councillor Champion has made, that we, and also referring to the fact that, as Dan has mentioned, there will be an annual review, that we would encourage the airport to use the annual review to, I think of the word, make more ambitious or whatever the carbon reduction already within the surface access strategy. So there is a kind of built-in mechanism for pushing it further without. We endorse it, but we'd like to see it perhaps go further, you know, as possibly as new technologies come into place that would facilitate that.
Okay, so would you like to consider some just some wording to go with that as a recommendation? We'll just move on to you got that. Okay, thank you. Councillor Padder, please.
Very quickly, to add to Councillor Law's point, is I think there are technologies and innovations that are progressing in this space. So I think if there is an opportunity to try and use our politics to influence, then we should surely keep that open. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I saw Councillor Hampton next, and then we'll come back to Councillor Lubbock.
Yeah, thank you. But back to Councillor Champion's point about using the word ambitious, I think to reiterate again, we really are looking at this particular surface access strategy. We've already noted that some of the increases in bus usage and other modes of sustainable transport is quite significant. I think it's hard kind of not to use that figure, and I think you're right that we can't conflate this to the overall operations of the airport, and don't necessarily want to imply that this is ambitious in a greater scheme, but this is really precise purpose of this strategy and the decision we have to make. I think if we don't want to use that term, it would be more useful to bring to the table kind of some further actions or work that needs to be done. I completely agree with Councillor Law's point that, of course, we want to encourage them to be more ambitious. The annual review is probably the perfect point to do that. But I'm still, for me, I think looking at what's in front of us is really important to, as Councillor Padder says, kind of influence where we can, even if it is small reductions in the bigger picture. But this is what we're looking at now and what we have to be looking at and give our endorsement to, or consider in this forum giving our endorsement to. So really keen not to conflate the two. Anything we say that's kind of relatively positive about this work, we don't necessarily want to apply to the airport operations as a whole, but this is very clear that we are not looking at the operations as a whole. So I'm fairly content that what's here, especially the work officers have done to increase the level of ambition, relatively comfortable using that term from what we've seen before us today.
Okay, thank you. So, well, essentially, I think you're agreeing with Councillor Champion's view that the overall emissions of an airport are significantly higher, and therefore we shouldn't. Well, in terms of this meeting, we shouldn't be considering them, but it is relevant in the context. Okay, Councillor Lubbock, please.
Yes, if we're doing recommendations, I'd say to encourage the airport to work more proactively with the bus operators to have a joined up approach to the city centre and the train station, and to help people make their journeys to and from the airport more sustainable. Okay. And I understand what people are saying. It sounds a bit odd to look for sustainable transport when you're going by plane somewhere, but actually people do want sustainable transport because they don't want to have to pay to leave their car. And if it could be made easier, more people would do it. And if that takes cars off our roads, I'm happy with that. You're not going to get people to travel less as quickly as you are going to get people travelling to the airport more sustainably. I mean, I know it from talking to friends who go to the airport. They don't want to have to get taxis and take their cars. They would much rather get public transport if they could. And so I think we've got to do what we can, and every bit of carbon saved is carbon saved, and if it's less congestion, and let's just do what we can do.
Thank you. I don't think there's any suggestion here for looking at the table that there's going to be fewer cars on the road. In fact, quite the opposite. There's going to be a lot more as a result of the expansion of the airport, many of which will, of course, be electric cars and hybrid cars. So they're doing much of the heavy lifting here with the CO2 reduction. Okay, and I do have a question that might be related to that a little bit, and this is for Dan and the targets. So as you moved along from September 2023 to the current position, and as those targets changed, what additional measures did you add to the strategy along that route to get to where you are now with this list?
Yeah, so some examples of additional measures are there was one we spoke about in quite a lot of detail about the yellow pedalway route that currently there's a missing gap on the yellow pedalway route through the airport site. So there's a measure in there to do a feasibility study to look at options for how that could be accommodated through the airport site. There's additional measures in there about incentivizing bus use and also linking up with the Beryl bike scheme in Norwich, which has been successful, and incentivizing that. There's the one which the airport are implementing at the moment about having a travel hub within the terminal that provides real-time information for passengers as they're arriving and leaving, so they can look at the modes for their onward journey. Yeah, so those are some additional ones that come to mind. Also, we strengthen the measures around facilities at the airport and also at the tenant businesses for people who walk or cycle into work. So that's things like lockers, shower facilities, places to change. So that's some of the extra things that we spoke about during the joint working group meetings.
Okay, thank you. And with some of the work that you're planning in this strategy, you'll need to work with the bus companies and local authorities. So what is the plan for funding any of the improvements like the cycleway? Is it proposed that Norwich Airport will fund that public investment, or are you relying on that infrastructure? Or are you relying on public investment, at least in part, to support this?
So that would be the purpose of the feasibility study. There's also a part of that to explore funding opportunities, whether that's like partially funded by the airport or if it draws on public funding. So that's something that will be worked through as part of the measure.
Okay, so should those feasibility studies result in negative outcomes, how would the strategy work then?
Is that as in negative outcome, as in a cycle route through the site's not feasible?
I'm sure a cycle route is probably feasible, but if the feasibility study produced a cost that was prohibitive either to the council or to the airport, what would happen to the strategy then? How would it work? Is that something that you can answer, or Councillor Giles?
I can have a go.
Please.
So yeah, I think that in that case it would probably be a case of revisiting the infrastructure requirements for a new cycle route and looking at ways, is there anything that could be done to reduce the cost of it while still delivering positive outcomes? That would be my sort of thinking on that question. Yeah, I can pass that one back to Councillor Giles if he's got anything else to add.
I think following that discussion, we need to talk about that. With the airport, there is obviously the infrastructure investment fund that the Greater Norwich Growth Board decides, and obviously sustainable transport is one of the key priorities of that. So I'm sure that some of the investment for these measures will come out of that IIF funding, which is what used to be called Strategic Sale.
Okay, thank you. So perhaps this is another question for Councillor Giles. Given that some of the proposals may require public investment, what benefit will they have, and how can we as a panel and cabinet ensure that the benefits of those new infrastructure projects are felt across the city and not just for the airport?
Well, clearly the airport has set out plans to intensify, and the primary benefit of them will be lower carbon emissions than would happen if we were to not support such investment. But clearly it would also make it more easy for more convenient for Norwich residents to access the airport than it is currently without using private car. Really, I need to go away and discuss that with colleagues with responsibility on the Transport for Norwich committee and come back to you.
Okay, thank you. Hopefully that's noted. Dan, where are you going to come in?
Yeah, just another small point to add. I think the airport, as well as being an airport, it does also have a role as a transport hub. people might pass by it or use it as part of their journey without actually traveling to the airport itself. So I think thinking of things like cycle routes, improving the route through the airport would also have benefit for people passing through as part of a different journey to a different destination. So just also wanted to add that on. Thanks.
Thank you. Yes, I noticed somewhere in the document it talks about it being a sustainable transport hub, which Councillor Champion might have a comment on. Mike, you had your hand up.
I think it might benefit sustainable access to the nest, which is obviously a very positive facility for activity in the area.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions or recommendations?
Can you say that again, please, Mike?
The nest, so the old Anglian window sports.
Yes.
That's now sort of community
sports. Oh, I see.
And the yellow pedal route goes up there, then on to Horsford.
But it's what, about a mile from the airport?
Oh, it's less than that.
Less than that,
yeah.
On the whole road.
There's when you go up the A140, there's a field between the end of Helsden and the NDR, and it's just to your left there. And that's also where Norfolk County Cricket Club are based there as well.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Okay. Anything else? I have quite a comprehensive list of recommendations that I wanted to put forward, so I don't know what's the best way of approaching this. Would you like me to read them out? I wrote the list down before we had exact clarity on what the scope of this meeting was. So some of them may not be permissible.
Sorry, if it may help, Chair, perhaps it would be helpful if we took possibly 5 minutes to go through them and then cut out the ones, and then we could save time in that sense.
Yes,
as an option.
Yeah. So shall we? Do you want to
just adjourn for 5 minutes and then we can have a look at that and then put forward those ones.
Okay. So it's a good time in that case to have a break, and anyone that wants to have a look at this can stay, but perhaps you're suggesting that we just share it with officers first to see if they can.
Yeah. So what I'm suggesting, to be absolutely clear, is just so that we'd have a look to get myself, you, and Mike, and then see what actually was in with the remit of what we can do, and then read out the ones that therefore afterwards back to the committee.
Yeah. Okay. That sounds sensible. So shall we take 10 minutes? Yeah. Okay. We'll
So thank you, members. And so just for the public watching and for those to be aware, so during the break, I took away the proposed suggestions that Councillor Stuteley would wish to make to the meeting. So my advice to the committee would be, so what we'll do is, this advice to Councillor Stuteley and to yourselves, would be that what's proposed is not something that we can force upon the airport. That's not what the report in front of you is to do today. You're only being asked to endorse it. The strongest action that would be possible to do from these conditions, from these proposals that have been tabled, and which we'll read through to make sure it's absolutely clear, is that, the strongest action would be that the panel asks that officers contact the airport regarding the following points, and that they are explored prior to the decision being made at Cabinet to endorse it. That is the strongest that I can suggest that this panel could do, because because this panel isn't a decision maker. It cannot force us to do it, but it can ask officers to go away and ask the airport to look into these matters prior to it coming back to going to the Cabinet for endorsement, and that would be on top of those other recommendations that the committee have made as well. So that would be my advice to the committee. And Chair, if you wish to make a proposal along those lines, that's what I would suggest would be a way, because otherwise it would be arguably inadmissible as a proposal to put these and put them as requirements, because we don't have the power to make any decision on that, to do that.
Okay, thank you. So the reason why I put these together was because I felt that the document and the proposals that were in the strategy perhaps weren't ambitious enough, and I think we have an opportunity here especially as a number of years have passed since the overall strategy was endorsed by the council, to be genuinely ambitious and attempt to reduce emissions, not just reduced emissions by a small amount, but by a significant amount. And I've put together a list of items that I think could be considered by the airport, and most of which are probably achievable, and all of which I hope would contribute to reducing that carbon footprint. So I would like to propose that we put those recommendations forward as described by Rob. Do I have a seconder for that, please? Councillor Hockner, please. Also, did you have a question as well? Because I saw your hand.
Yes, I did. I'm wondering how this affects the cabinet timeframe. So does cabinet need us to endorse this before they can endorse it? Probably not. So I guess maybe there's also a recommendation to cabinet to wait for a response to these requests for further information from the airport before they decide about endorsing?
That is essentially what we're asking cabinet to do, to delay for a further month before they make the final endorsement on this. And what we would do in this committee is endorse the document subject to consideration of the recommendations as put forward. Is that correct, Rob?
Yeah, so what you're being asked to do today is essentially, if I get the exact wording from the report, for the recommendation is that it is recommended that the Sustainable Development Panel recommend that cabinet endorse. So you're giving a recommendation on whether to do that or not. So on this, you're asking that you've raised these points. So we will need to just, before we go any further, I think we need to have them read out so that it's absolutely clear. So Councillor Stuteley, if you could make that absolutely clear. Sorry, Councillor.
I don't need them read out and I don't support them. So where do I go with that? I mean, lots of these things the airport is not responsible for. And where do we get the information to be able to say that we want this to happen? I don't know who is the chair or who takes part in the cross council transport working group. Well, where's that in the report? And about solar panels on things and these social and economic value conditions. Well, why should we suddenly be asking for a contribution to the Green Mobility Fund for locally bike, bus pass and car share initiatives? Where does it come from?
It's not in the report because it has come from, well, it's ideas put forward by me, but
the report in front of me, and it's got nothing about some of these in.
Well, the airport transport working group, I think, is mentioned, and it's if not, then I've read it in further research, and it's currently proposed or currently chaired by the airport, and the proposal was that it could be chaired by the members of each of the councils rather than the airport, in order to perhaps facilitate faster implementation of conditions.
I was going to say that there is the Norwich Airport Consultative Committee, which is made up of Norwich, Broadland, all the surrounding town and parish councils in the county, and whether it would be an alternative suggestion to bring it into their work programme rather than perhaps setting up a separate panel.
But much of this is not in the report. Why are we suddenly discussing these things? I mean, it's you're asking bus companies to commit to zero emission ground vehicles by 2030. Well, that's not fair, is it? You know, why suddenly do the bus companies have to do these things?
No, the proposal here is that
taxis, buses, airport fleet, buses and taxis.
Yes, everything on site. So so anything that transports people around the site. So essentially the fleet of airport vehicles, of which there are probably quite a few that have several functions. That was the proposal here. not to have exclusively.
Implement integrated ticketing between air, rail and bus operators.
Yeah, that's something that would need to be explored rather than a condition. So I've listed it as conditions, and that's at the top of the paper, but it's essentially areas to explore under this.
It said. Doesn't say areas to explore, but bullet list.
So
I can't suddenly. I've got to give some consideration to this list. I can't suddenly support that. It's not really part of the report. It's something that you've thought about beforehand. Do you sit on some other board or something?
no, I don't.
No. Have you had experience of sitting on some sort of airport board?
I don't have an interest in this apart from the environmental and social impact of the airport. Rob, please.
Thank you, Chair. So just to make clear, so with what Councillor Stootley is able to propose here is not that these things are conditioned. We don't have the information. That is why in the suggestion is that they are looked at and explored prior to the Cabinet making their decision and giving before their endorsement. Now, it might be that the answer is that they need more time. It might be that it's not possible to do that. That's as much as this committee can do. We don't have the information, hence why in Councillor Stootley's proposal is asking for some clarity on those points and arguably why they haven't been considered for part of this. So it's a valid proposal in that sense, but it cannot go any further of conditioning anything. So essentially, when it comes to the Cabinet report and these points have not been grounded out, the decision can still be made by Cabinet because the document would stand on its own merit. But this committee essentially is asking them to look into that prior to making that, so that then they can be better informed when they make their decision, as is what the body's purpose is. I hope that's.
So, and essentially, when I put this list together, my feeling was that we hadn't reached a point where it was sufficient, or the proposals put forward were sufficient. So I was trying to think of as many things as I could that would improve the situation. And it's perhaps a menu from which to choose the most practical and impactful solutions along the way, but also to add a little bit of governance. So I saw Councillor Hampton first, and then Councillor Hockler, please.
Yeah, I think I largely share Councillor Ludwig's concerns. I think it would have been helpful if more of this came out in discussion and we could have got some immediate kind of steers from Dan and officers, rather than this being done independently and detached from anything we've talked about. There's some things that I think are in here. I think there's some that are completely out of scope. There's some that I may be coming back to the exact wording of what we're being asked, but I wouldn't even be comfortable approaching the airport with, because I think they're missing the mark. Like Councillor Ludwig mentioned about binding with the targets, it says require the airport to show how it aligns with Norwich's 2030 net zero framework, not just its own 2040 operations only target. For starters, it's we have a citywide 2045 a target, and no idea how that binding them to another authority's document would work anyway. But I think there's so much here to consider. I don't really know what to do with it. This is a lot of information to be thrown out quite late in a meeting. Even if we were to take it away and consider, I wouldn't necessarily want to approach the airport with something that I think is really out of step from kind of what we're meant to be looking at in places, and in places needs fact checking. And again, I think the meeting earlier probably would have been the right forum to have some of these discussions. But yeah, but maybe if we can come back to the precise wording of the recommendation regarding these, that might kind of help allay some of those concerns. But yeah.
Okay, Rob, do you want to just cover that again, please?
Of course, councillors. So the wording that I would suggest that is the strongest that you could do is that the Sustainable Development Panel asks officers contact the airport regarding the following points, and that they are explored with the airport regarding the ASAS prior to the decision being made by Cabinet. and that would be the list. Now, just for benefit of Dan, and I think other people, I think we would need to read out the full list to make sure it's absolutely there. So if we could do that at this point, I think then we can move on to the next part of the discussion or debate.
Okay, so I'll do that, shall I?
Sorry.
Just in terms of procedure,
Yeah.
does this committee recommend to Cabinet? So does that then go to Cabinet to make a call on, or does that just, how does that work? Because this presumably is on the Cabinet agenda.
Yeah.
So would this bind Cabinet to not be able to proceed with that until these answers are?
No, it wouldn't bind Cabinet to
Yeah.
not make a decision. It's not pre-scrutiny. It's not a requirement that it would have to be fulfilled. It would obviously be, I would say, in Cabinet's interest to listen to the wishes of this committee on its reasoning made. But it's, as I say, the recommendation would be to contact the airport regarding those points, so that then we can only ask. We can't force them to respond on those points, but we can put in as much emphasis to get an answer to some of those points ahead of the Cabinet making their decision, so that they are fully informed on those points prior to making their decision.
But just one more quick follow up to that, maybe aimed at Mike and Adam, but was there any rationale behind it coming to November? Are there time constraints that we're aware of that play into this?
I'm not aware of such time constraints. Perhaps Dan can tell us, is it urgent for the airport to get this endorsed?
I'm not aware of any specific time constraints, but obviously they'd want to get this endorsed as soon as practically possible. But yeah, there's not a specific reason why it's November. I think that was Joy who mentioned that to me first.
Yes, we wanted to progress through SD panel, then to Cabinet as per normal.
Okay, thank you. And I believe Norwich City Council is the first to consider it, and Broadland District Council haven't yet. So I think that there probably is scope for a delay of a month or so. Councillor Giles, I saw you, but also I've got Councillor Padder and Councillor Hockner, please.
Yes, I was just to seek clarity from Rob. So, so if that recommendation were to pass from SD panel to postpone it a month, would the relevant Cabinet member, i.e. myself, be able to postpone it for a month? Or would I have to wait until next Wednesday for Cabinet to decide whether to postpone it a month? Because I think the former, if that was the will of the panel, I think the former would clearly be smoother.
So that this panel doesn't have the power to postpone something off of the Cabinet agenda. It doesn't have that inherent right. It's up to
could I choose?
I was going to say, the portfolio holder can ask for consent. We can inform members that will note that.
So I wouldn't have to wait till next Wednesday.
Not at all. No, we could, if you wanted to do that, we could do that tomorrow.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Padder.
Thank you. Yeah, I think this is a very ambitious list, though I do also share Councillor Lubbock's concerns. I think for me, personally, I would like some context behind each of those points, but I think a way forward could be keeping something like this very high level. So what are the airport doing in terms of environmental, climate conditions, sustainable travel and governance? So we have more context, and then we can consider it, rather than a big long list saying which bit can we tick off. So for me, I would rather just keep it, very informal, high level, and then we can think about it from there. But I don't feel comfortable presenting a whole big long list to the airport.
Okay, thank you. The purpose, again, I'll just reiterate, the purpose of me writing this list was not to necessarily impose conditions, although perhaps I might like that. It was to come up with ideas and concepts where the airport could potentially improve their own ambition for this strategy. And as I go through the list, after we've heard from Councillor Hockner, I think I will just explain a couple of things along the way. But clearly, some of those items may not be practical, may not be achievable, and I think the purpose of, rather than to discuss this into the night, every detail into the night, the purpose was to put it forward to the airport and through Councillor Giles for further consideration, rather than to impose this. So the idea is simply to just delay the process to see if we can improve it, and that is the remit of this. This panel is to try and improve sustainable development in the city. So that was the reasoning behind my producing this list. Councillor Hockner, please.
My question would have been whether we can maybe share the text with Dan as well, so he has sight of the different points, and maybe he can comment on them as well, so we have the airport perspective as well. I think you're reading it out, but I think it's a lot to listen to in one go. So I don't know if it can be copied into the chat or something.
It probably would be helpful for Dan to have the list in front of him. So are we able to? Yeah. Okay. I mean, I have it on my phone. So shall we pause for 2 minutes anyway, just to sort out that bit of admin? It's just so that he has the information in front of him as I'm reading it out, I think, more than anything, because the idea is that Dan and his company in the airport take it away. Okay, welcome back. So before I run through these bullet points, are there any further questions before I start doing that? I think it might be useful if I run through them. But Councillor Hockner and then Councillor Laws, please.
I think we had a proposition from Councillor Paddock. The recommendation could be for officers to have a conversation about these themes rather than the exact bullet points that not everybody might agree on. So I just wonder whether that is a recommendation we're also considering. That might be a compromise.
That sounds like a reasonable compromise to me. I think as long as for me and also we have the other recommendations that we discussed in this meeting, as long as they go forward and are considered by officers and the airport, the wording that we put forward as a panel is as long as it achieves that, I'm happy to change it. Rob, any suggestions, please?
Sorry, so that's changing from the list to the heads of terms on that list. Is that correct?
Yes, and that would give officers scope to decide which ones they feel comfortable taking forwards and which ones they think aren't necessarily viable.
Okay, well, that may save us some considerable time now.
So that's as proposed. Are you happy with that?
I am, yes. So
and did you have a seconder, I think?
Yes, I formally. Yeah, and I'll second that.
Okay, so if you could just run through, just for the recording, Chair, the heads of terms on that, just so that we're absolutely clear.
Okay. Okay, so this is these here. Okay, so I've put a number of recommendations under each of the following. So there's an environmental and climate conditions list. There's a sustainable and active travel conditions list. Social and economic value conditions, and governance and delivery conditions is the fourth area, and that is what I would propose, and the conditions or suggestions, recommendations under each to be proposed, considered by officers, and those that are relevant and achievable to be discussed with the airport and with a view to improving the strategy. Okay. Is the next process to move to the vote on that, or do we discuss that item further? I think I would propose to move to the vote, given the time.
And that's with the previous recommendations as well that were made.
Yes.
Can we? Sorry, I've forgotten the previous ones.
I've got that one down here. So
let's have a read. Yeah.
The cabinet notes alongside their decision that the expansion plans, which was Councillor Hockner's recommendation, there's Councillor Law's one, that the committee encourage the airport to use the annual review to make targets more ambitious going forward. And I did incorporate part of Councillor Padder's recommendation in that, and using technologies where possible. And then finally from Councillor Lubbock, there was to encourage more close working for the bus operators and with the train station to make journeys more sustainable. And those were the 3 extra ones which would be on top of that, Chair.
Okay, thank you. So those in favour of that recommendation as amended?
All of them in one go.
So, Chair, you
Yeah.
can take it all as one, or you can take them individually. It's your choice.
Well, I'm going to propose to take that all as one and hope that, that all of those conditions can go forward. So that is
Yeah.
Councillor Champion.
Just to throw a thought out there in the world, the Councillor Laws's proposal of the annual review, could these not be linked in with that proposal to go that in a year's time, we would like to have your, these are some of the things we'd like you to achieve in your annual review, or some of the ambitions. Could we not link it in somehow like that?
I guess we could, but I don't know how long we'd prepare to wait for further conditions or further improvements to be added to the strategy. I think my proposal, and I think the aim behind all of those recommendations is the same. So I don't know why you're separating these, Councillor Lubbock, from the other 3.
Them. I haven't got the context of these. I've got no understanding of some of them. Whereas at least with this report, it was clear about what we were looking at for the most part. Well, it was, if I'd read it all thoroughly. But I haven't got the context of some of these things, and I don't know where they've come from.
Okay, so
I'm not happy to recommend this. No,
you're not prepared to have them explored, even if they're dismissed by officers because I've gone off piste. No. Okay, that's fine.
Not, I haven't got the time and information.
Right. Okay, so let's vote on each of the recommendations. Each of the 3 suggested by other councillors, and then mine as a separate list. So the first one, again, Rob, please read that out.
Thank you, Chair. That was the recommendation from Cabinet Councillor Herkner, that Cabinet notes alongside their decision that the expansion plans documented in the strategy, and noting that the changing guidance from climate change. I have got the formal wording saved, but I haven't got it right in front of me here. But it was, as you said earlier, Councillor, about those points.
Okay, all those in favour of that recommendation?
Just the one that's read out. 2, 3, 4.
Anyone against? And abstentions?
Yeah.
3. Oh, sorry. Second one is Councillor Law's one, which I can.
Okay. Recommendation 2, Rob, please.
So the second recommendation, which was Councillor Laws's proposal, was that the committee encourages the airport to use the annual review to make the targets more ambitious going forward using technologies where possible.
Okay, all those in favour?
That is unanimous.
Okay, and number 3, please.
This is Councillor Lubbock's proposal, which was to encourage closer working ties between the bus operators and the train station to make journeys more sustainable to the airport.
Again, yeah, all those in favour?
Unanimous.
Again, that's unanimous. And the 4th one, please.
Fourth recommendation was from Councillor Stutley, and it was that the Sustainable Development Panel asked that officers contact the airport regarding the heads of terms as detailed in of the environmental climate conditions, sustainable and active travel conditions, social and economic value conditions, and governance and delivery conditions, which were sent around to members, and that they are explored with the airport regarding the airport strategy. I can't remember the full word of it. The airport surface access strategy prior to the decision being made by Cabinet.
Okay, thank you. All those in favour of that, please. That is
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
against.
2.
Okay, so that's carried. Okay, thank you, everybody. That brings that item to a close. And I think, as we've had 2 hours, we need to decide whether we will continue and have the report from Mike. I would like to suggest that we do, because Mike has previously indicated that it's relatively brief and it is an update. So is everybody happy to hear that report? Okay. Thank you, Councillor Lovick.
I'll have to go in about 15 minutes, but I'm happy to start it.
Okay, so yeah, so those in favour of continuing, extending the meeting, and that is okay, and yes, and 1 against, I believe. Okay, so Mike, please, we'll just hand over to you for the update.
Okay. Okay, so this is chiefly about the Greater Norwich Local Plan Review. There's a little bit about emerging sub-regional planning, the spatial development strategy, and a little bit about national development management policies. The reason I've included those is they're quite important in understanding the potential context for the change in the Greater Norwich Local Plan, which will become clearer as I talk through this. So, you have a print off. I'll just talk through it and tell you when I'm moving on, I suppose. I'll tell Robert when I'm moving on. Okay, so I just point to that really nice slide of a drone photo of East Norwich, and I think that's really quite good, quite a recent one. That's in the GNLP. Okay, move on, please. So, first of all, why are we reviewing the Greater Norwich Local Plan? As I'm sure you're aware, the Greater Norwich Local Plan was adopted in March 2024. So the first reason is that the government requires us to review plans within 5 years. But secondly, and most importantly, as you'll be aware, new housing methodology came from the government in December 2024. It raises Greater Norwich's numbers by 34%. From around 1,900 homes per year to around 2,600 homes per year, and across the whole of Norfolk from around 4,000 to 6,000 homes per year. Successive governments have required up-to-date local plans, including providing for enough homes to meet needs. So this is the focus. We keep hearing the 1.5 million homes. This is how it affects us locally. Then some of the wider context, policy and process reforms. So this is part of wider national policies reforms, which emphasise digital planning and aligning growth with infrastructure delivery. I think that's something we've been good at in Greater Norwich, and we have the Greater Norwich Local Plan. It does include infrastructure to serve our growth needs, and we've obviously got the Greater Norwich Growth Board. We have SIL funding. We have over the years, and some of the photos show it, we have provided infrastructure to help growth. Now, the national development management policies are going to be introduced, and local plans will focus more on the strategy for growth. This map here is our existing strategy for growth in the Greater Norwich Local Plan. So the focus will be more on that and on sites and less on supporting policies. So in the current Greater Norwich Local Plan, we have the strategy in policy 1 and then policy 7. Then we have other policies 2 to 6 that are more detailed about how growth should happen. I anticipate with these national development management policies, a lot of that will be done nationally, but we need to wait and see. And we have been told we'll get our first sight of the National Development Management Policies next month, but we have been told that before. So I'm hoping this time we will see the National Development Management Policies and there'll be a consultation. At the same time, we have legislation going through for spatial development strategies. So we're likely to have one for Norfolk and Suffolk, which will be a higher level strategic plan. I'll talk about that a bit more shortly. Now, moving over the next page, drivers for GNLP Review 2. Okay. Another reason why we need
sorry to interrupt. It appears I may have missed an opportunity to declare an interest, which is that I am chair of the Norwich over the Wensum Neighbourhood Forum, which itself is set up to produce a local plan. So I thought I'd better just mention that because I failed. Neighbourhood plan, yes, which I failed to ask the committee officer at the beginning of the meeting. Thank you.
Just to be clear on that, as that's not, we're not making any decisions here, that does not affect Councillor Stuteley's staying in the meeting for the rest of it.
Thank you. So another reason why we need to review the local plan is we do not currently have a 5-year land supply. It's 4.85 years. And then just a note here, adoption will be likely to be by the succeeding unit tree or unit trees, depending on what happens. Now, just by way of explanation, I think this quote from Jim McMahon was very helpful. He said just a few months ago, I continue to expect local planning authorities to work towards the adoption of an up-to-date local plan as soon as possible. So although the GNLP was adopted in March 24, because those housing figures have risen significantly, it's not up to date in that respect. So local government reorganisation should not hinder this essential work, and neither should the introduction of new legal frameworks for local plan making later this year or our strategic planning reforms. So we've got these other things going on, but government's very clear it's not a reason for stopping making local plans. Now, next page is about the early Greater Norwich local plan, that should say review work streams. So what we're trying to do as a team of officers, we're setting up low regrets work schemes, ones that we are confident that with this change will be required whatever. But this will partly dependent on government announcements. We're anticipating that the new plan system, the new local plan system we know is going to come in, which will require us to produce a local plan in 3 years. The Greater Norwich local plan took 7.5 years. We're going to have to do it in half the time. But the regulations around that, we have been told by MHCLG, will become available next month. So the sort of work we're doing now, we're looking at spatial data, we're updating our baseline data. We're going to conduct a call for sites, which I'll talk about shortly. We're working on cross-boundary coordination and identifying required evidence updates. So these are all key early tasks. And this cross-boundary coordination is something we are in a good place for in Norfolk, because we have worked together across the different districts in Norfolk through the Norfolk Strategic Planning Forum. So we're in a good place. We've been doing this for a number of years. We've been thinking about stakeholder engagement. So we've had early dialogue with elected members. So this is why I wanted to speak to you. This is an example of it. I've spoken to the Greater Norwich Development Partnership twice now. We've not gone to the communities yet, but we have gone to the Developers Forum, and we're going to be developing an engagement strategy. So it's important to say that we haven't fired the starting pistol yet. This is all preparatory work. Policy and project planning. So we're looking at our current policies and the 30-month project planning that will be required to ensure alignment with new national policy. And we're looking at our digital capacity, looking at our governance and the officer team. So we are in the process of appointing a digitalization officer who should help us to be able to be prepared for this new way of doing things. Where we have an officer team now. We just had a meeting all day today where that's being established, the officer team. My post has been created. We have a project manager. So we're getting going on it, everything. Governance, we need to look at is if there's any way we can streamline governance processes, because the speed with which we're going to have to do things. Now, I'll just go on to the next page as a strategic growth overview. So you have a map here, which is where the housing numbers are focused already in the Greater Norwich Local Plan. So we have an excellent foundation through the recently adopted strategy, but the Greater Norwich Local Plan review needs to plan for additional housing, more jobs, and other types of sites, and an updated strategy to meet growth goals and changes to national policies for growth driving sectors. So I've now listed the growth driving sectors that are in the new national planning policy framework. These are the priorities for the nation as a whole. They're in the national industrial strategy now. All of them exist in Greater Norwich. So there's advanced manufacturing, creative industries in Norwich, obviously very, very important, clean energy, digital technologies, professional and business services, again, very important in Norwich, life sciences, very important at the research park, and finance. So that all of these key national industries, they do exist and are growing in our area. Infrastructure first planning, the GNLP review will need to ensure transport, utilities, education and healthcare improvements accompany development. So we'll be working with the utilities providers, with Norfolk County Council, transport providers and so on. Environmental and viability assessment. All growth options will have to be evaluated for their environmental, climate and biodiversity impacts and for their deliverability. So we understand that the sustainability appraisal process will be amended, but there will still be environmental assessment required. And then that final bullet point, we need to focus on balancing potential and options for urban intensification. So we'll be looking at what we can achieve in Norwich with more brownfield development. But we will almost certainly require further urban extensions. We will almost certainly require expansion of towns and key service centres, places below the town level. And we'll need to look at policies for villages. And then the members in South Norfolk in particular are very keen on a new settlement or settlements. So that will be part of the consideration. And I'm just going to focus on the new settlement or settlements now. So in the current Greater Norwich Local Plan, paragraph 164, which came from the inspectors, that said, this plan identifies enough sustainable sites within and on the edge of settlements to meet currently assessed need for the plan period. A review of the local plan, which is what we're doing now, will need to assess options for longer term growth, including the potential for a sustainable new settlement or settlements. But really important to say that that will have to be assessed alongside other options for growth. So it's not definite we'll have a new settlement or settlements, but it's certainly something South Norfolk members in particular are quite interested in. And now this is an interesting one. GNLP review extend the planning horizon to 2045. Our current plan goes to 2038. So it'll be from 2025 to 2045. But if we have a new settlement or settlements, we will have to extend to 2060. So it's a long way ahead if they are included. And that's a national requirement. But it does take, a new settlement takes a long while to get going. Next bullet point, in early 2025, South Norfolk Council submitted a site to the New Towns Task Force for consideration for a new settlement. It wasn't among the chosen 12, but still could be implemented through a GNLP review. So we will have to see if that is submitted, but it could be considered. Now, looking at comparison with other new settlements, if allocated, delivery of a new settlement could start around 2035. This is an estimate, but based on experience elsewhere, possibly at around 300 homes per annum. So I think a lot of people would take the view that a new settlement will be the panacea. It will provide for lots of our growth, most of our growth. I'm afraid it won't. It will only be part of our growth because it does take a long time to deliver. So we're estimating 300 homes per year based on Northstowe and Camborne near Cambridge and Cranbrook near Exeter. There's another new settlement at present being developed, which is delivering about 600 homes per year. That's at Ebbsfleet in Kent, but that has 3 growth areas. It has 3 stations. It's 17 minutes from central London and has a 15 home target, so 15,000 home target. So that's probably quite a different model. And going back to the context, our numbers, GNLP review is target is 2,590 homes per annum from 2025 to 2045. So we're talking much higher numbers. So the next thing we're going to do, the first main thing we're going to do for the new plan is the call for sites, and that's likely to start in early 2026, partially dependent on information from government. So this is the next page. The purpose of a call for sites, it allows submission of land for consideration for a range of uses, such as housing, including affordable housing, specialist housing, gypsy and traveller accommodation, employment and commercial uses, mixed use, biodiversity net gain, green infrastructure and neutrality, renewable energy, and community and leisure uses. The submission process will be through detailed site maps with ownership details, proposed use, constraints information, and that will be done online. But we will need also to support those people who are not able to do it online. So we're looking into how to do that. Once those sites have been submitted, we will assess and evaluate them, initially high level, then in more detail. We will have a communication strategy around this. It's really important that we support awareness and transparency. We need to target landowners, developers and community groups because it's easy when sites get submitted through a call for sites. It's very easy for people to look at a map and think all of this is going to happen. It won't be the case at all. With the Greater Norwich Local Plan, we had many more sites submitted than we needed. And we need to get that message across that people see lots and lots of sites on a map, but that doesn't mean they will all be chosen by any means. And it's important to get that message across. Okay, timelines. Members voted for a new local development scheme in March 2025. We've got 3 separate ones for Broadland, Norwich and South Norfolk. And we've had 2 GNDP meetings, and that committed us to a Greater Norwich Local Plan review. But those were interim at the time because we knew the timetables would change. Scoping work began last year. We will produce a project initiation document. That publication date is really important because that is when we fire the starting pistol. That date is when our 3 years goes from. So we're likely to get the regulations supporting information government from shortly, and I anticipate this PID will be produced sometime mid next year, but we can't say definitively. Adoption of the revised plan is targeted under the current LDS for March 2029. Due to the slight delays from government, I don't anticipate it'll be 2029, but it'll be more likely of around 2030, all being well. So that's all I wanted to say about the Greater Norwich Local Plan. If you're happy to take more, I can talk a little bit about the spatial development strategy and the National Development Management policies. You okay with that?
Okay. Members, do you have any questions on what we've heard so far? And I think perhaps at this stage of the evening we should
I hope,
keep
keep
them brief and high level.
by all means, send me an email if you want to.
Yeah, so this is very much an informative. So any members with questions can contact Mike separately.
So spatial development strategies, they have been brought in through the Planning and Infrastructure Bill and the English Devolution Bill. It's return of strategic planning. So in the past, counties used to produce structure plans, and this was our regional plan that was adopted in 2008 and then was rescinded by the coalition government in about 2011, I think. So it wasn't in place for very long. It was, to my mind, it was a very good plan. It had 37,500 homes for Greater Norwich, 35,000 jobs, and it introduced what was then a new concept, a green infrastructure network. And again, a new concept, the terminology wasn't used then, active travel and so on. So at the time, quite a progressive, radical document. Then it was replaced by the duty to cooperate under the Localism Act, and that has been quite heavily criticised, the duty to cooperate. So I said that in Norfolk we've done a good job of cooperating. Lots of parts of the country, they simply haven't. And you might have heard recently in Oxfordshire, Oxford City and their neighbouring Vale of Whitehorse and South Oxfordshire haven't been able to agree. So they've had failed local plans. They've not got through to examination. The same's happened around Bournemouth and with Dorset. So to reiterate, we have done well through that, but the general feeling has been that duty to cooperate hasn't really succeeded. So we're going back to sub-regional planning in this case, and it will be the combined mayoral authority, assuming that's established, that will be responsible for that. In the immediate term, it's the county councils, Norfolk and Suffolk, that are working on it, and we as districts are supporting them, but it's not our strategy. And then I'll just tell you a little bit about what that will do, the spatial development strategy. It will cover strategic cross-boundary issues, so it'll be housing numbers is the key one. So possibly Greater Norwich might have to take more housing, say from North Norfolk. North Norfolk has a really big increase in its housing numbers. Most of it is a national landscape, what used to be an area of outstanding natural beauty. So there's real questions about whether North Norfolk will be able to cope with its new housing numbers. So the spatial development strategy will be a means by which those numbers can be moved around. It'll work on infrastructure needs, environmental protection and enhancement. So for us, it's things like nutrient neutrality, it's water supply and so on. Transport corridors and employment growth. It will set the strategic direction for local plans, that strategic direction they must follow, but it won't allocate sites. So there'll still be, in Norwich, we'll still be allocating sites through the Norwich local plan or Greater Norwich local plan. That will continue to be the role. It will replace the Norfolk Strategic Planning Framework, the voluntary one we've been using, and there are potential synergies in the evidence base with the Greater Norwich local plan. It's likely to be adopted around about 2029. Now it's important, some people have said, well, if you're going to have that in place, why are you producing a local plan now before you have a regional, sub-regional strategy? Well, the main reason for the spatial development strategy to be adopted, then took 3 years to do a local plan. You wouldn't have new housing allocations for 8 years. So in an era where the government is saying we must increase housing numbers, that simply wouldn't work. So it does mean that there's a slight mismatch at the moment, but we're confident we can manage that. And finally, you'll be glad to hear, it's been a long evening, National Development Management Policy is the last one. So these are being introduced through the Levelling Up and Regeneration Act that went through a couple of years ago. It's a new category of national policy that has statutory weight in decision making. And if there's a conflict with local plans, the national policies will take precedence. I've told you that we're anticipating the draft policies next month. Their aim is to streamline decision making by reducing duplication in local plans. So streamline local plans. They're likely to cover a range of issues. I won't go through them all, but the sort of issues that we have in our Norwich development management policies at the moment. So we'll have to wait and see what is in the national ones, then to decide what we need to put in the Greater Norwich Local Plan Review and whether local DM policies should be developed. But that's going to be an interesting point because it might be better to wait until the unitaries are established. But we'll have to see. It's a wait and see at the moment. But for us planning nerds, it's quite an exciting time. Lots of things are changing. And to my mind, the return to the regional planning is really a positive step. Okay.
Okay, thank you very much. Perhaps we'll just have a few minutes for questions because I think it would be rude not to. And also, but first of all, thank you to Mike for putting that together, the slides and the report, and actually for explaining it so well, so that my questions will be minimised. Anybody? Yes, Councillor Padder, please.
You on
some of these from the current local plan. That is our housing trajectory. That's how we anticipate housing being delivered from 2018 to 2038 under our current local plan.
and the red is
And that bridge,
so yeah, so what's the red and what's the
the red, sorry, that was what had already been delivered when we the blue was what had already been delivered when we put together that graph, and the red was what was anticipated. So now we're 2 or 3 years further down the line. So some of that red will become blue. No doubt the bars won't be exactly the same size.
Thank you. Councillor Champion.
I just wanted to ask, you mentioned the mayoral combined authority, and if they come into existence next year, do they take the reins straight off the county there and then?
No, as I understand it, I'm not an expert on this, but as I understand it, there's going to be sort of a shadow situation.
Okay.
But the counties together, Norfolk and Suffolk, officers are already starting to look at things like evidence for a spatial development strategy. So it won't be from a standing base. The mayoral combined authority will have some information behind what they do.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? I've just got a high level question, really, just overall. But the government has been criticised, and there's been lots of speculation about whether it will be able to hit its targets, especially the 1.5 million target. And I imagine that this is there is some hope that we will be able to support that in Norwich. Just from your point of view, do you think there's any chance of the government hitting that 1.5 million target? And if not, what percentage do you think they might be able to achieve realistically? Thank you.
Well, no, I'm close to retirement now. I can say what I want to say. I think it's very ambitious. I think you'll all know it was in. Well, hang on. It was in all 4 of the main parties' manifesto as a target around 1.5 million. I think I doubt it will be achieved, but I think it's a good idea to have an ambitious target that they can push towards. So I think it's a good thing to do it.
Okay, thank you. I suppose an ambitious target missed is better than a non-ambitious target missed. Yeah. Okay, Councillor Laws.
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation. Just an information question, really, to do with national. It's likely to cover. They are likely to cover. There isn't anything specifically on sort of employment, generating employment, given that this is to do with levelling up standard. That's likely to be.
Yeah, sorry, that's just my.
It's not criticism. I'm just curious to know.
No, you said that. Yeah, I must have missed it out. So, yeah, it should be in there.
Okay, that's interesting. Thank you.
If there are no other questions or comments, we'll draw the committee to a close. With thanks to everybody, and especially to our guest, whose name has gone from my head. It was so long ago, Dan Bowditch. Thanks to him for attending, and everybody else. That's it. Thank you.